Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Dental Disruptors Podcast. My name is Jake Larson, your host. This is my co-host, Clint Berry. Clint, say what's up.
What's up?
And we've got a good friend of ours and an amazing guest, Tom, here with us from Medix Dental. We've known Tom for years, back in the Weave days. He's done some stuff with us here at Kala, writing articles. Always been willing to give us advice and share his opinion. So we're really excited to have Tom here and that we can all learn from him. So Tom, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Tom, before we start, I kind of introed you and your company a little bit, but let's just dive into a little bit about you, your background. I love to make sure the audience understand the great work that you've done with Medix, how you've grown that, the services you provide. So let's start there so that we can just learn a little about you and what you do at Medix.
Yeah, I mean, I like to tell an abbreviated version of the story, but my good friend of mine from high school, her mom was a 2-location periodontal practice office manager, Sharon Wallace. So she and I were friends because I was one of her daughter's only friends that liked Hall & Oates as much as she does. And so that was our common bond. But anyway, they were switching from a Mac-based PMS to a PC-based one. And so they got a quote for computers from their software vendor. And she's like, hey, Tom, you got your company doing IT. Come take a look at this quote. And after looking at it, pretending to fall on the floor, we saved Doctor about $25,000 between the two practices, got better equipment. He took an unplanned vacation, and I realized that there was an opportunity there. So, that was where I became well acquainted with the DDS tax, where everything was just priced more. And we initially started out as more value oriented. And then in the 20 plus years that we've been doing it, we've just been kind of trying to stay ahead, look around the corner to see what the needs are and the shortcomings are in the space. And so we just tend to focus on not just day-to-day help desk support with IT, but also having the most comprehensive cybersecurity stack in our industry, but also then helping with strategy, because that's the big area of we're going to grow. We're at 2 locations. What decisions should we make now that are going to save us a lot of headache by the time we're at 20? And fight, same thing at 5 to 50. And so through this, I've got to know a lot of cool dental technology startups like you guys. In some cases, I've done some informal advising with them, and I thrive off of new and better and more efficient and Exactly. And I'm just a big computer geek in general. So my wife's like, how can you be on a computer all day, every day for work, and then do it at night for fun? And I was like, yeah, just been that way for a long time. It just makes no sense. So
I love it
deeply.
Yes.
Yeah, we love that mentality. That's my wife too. I'm a programmer, right, by trade. And she's like, you program all day for work and you come home and you can program more stuff. I'm like, well, I'm programming the hobby stuff now.
Yeah, the fun for me, the for household stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, love it.
That's so awesome. And I love, Tom, just to kind of echo one thing you said for our audience. He mentioned kind of starting kind of a price-based value proposition for your company, but as that experience has grown, becoming a true partner and consultant and team member with the clients that you serve. I've seen that firsthand with Tom and talking to people that use his services. And it is absolutely that for Medix. It's not a transactional thing whatsoever. It's a partnership and planning ahead and looking out for the goals and future of the customers, which I absolutely love, because I'm a big fan of bringing value to people and not just selling for the lowest price possible, right? Like, how can we actually bring value and benefit the world in the dental space? So shout out to what you've built at Medix. It's really awesome. And now, I mean, you're kind of nationwide, right? Kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Our team, we're headquartered in Iowa, so we have our warehousing and prep and procurement center there in our business operations, but our team's distributed all across the country. So as with our clients as well.
So awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We're excited to dive into this. And the topic today is a little bit different. We usually talk about the spear of the arrow and something that is like, this is how you're going to disrupt the industry with this new technology or this new strategy. Today, we're going to talk about something that if you don't address it, it will prevent you from being able to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish and disrupt the industry or disrupt something. And that is the tech mistakes that kill DSO scalability. I'm sure there's been some fun fires that you've had to put out of people that did make these mistakes, and you have learned what those are and how to avoid those. So we're excited to dive into that topic. So Thomas, we worked on coming up with that topic together. I'd love to hear just from you how why we selected that one and what about that resonates and gets you excited to share it with our audience.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think about 7-8 years ago now, we started working with some DSOs where our clients were selling to them, and we were seeing, like, in a couple of the cases, our clients said, we are not letting our IT company go because they were so important to how we operate. And that's allowed us to having some relationships with this DSOs. And what we saw was that everybody was kind of trying to reinvent the wheel poorly, and they're having the same challenges, bumping their head at the same ceiling. And so we tried to share some insight that we had from being parts of these journeys, even on a smaller scale. But they're like, you guys are just IT. You don't know. And so what made me so passionate about it is like, okay, so a lot of people are making the same mistakes. What's the reasoning behind that? And what I kind of realized is that, even now, like, group dentistry and DSOs is kind of an immature industry. There's the giants that have done it. But there's not a lot of people who have, like, done it before and then moved on and helped somebody to do it again. So it creates kind of a very small talent pool of IT leadership in dental. And so, I see that as a big challenge because they'll pull somebody from healthcare, which is great. They have a lot of insights, but they try to repeat a playbook that they know. And dental is just so different. And they're coming into, in some cases, 100 locations with 100 on-premise servers, all the data sitting there, so there's so many things. And like, one of the things that I've kind of deduced from having these conversations is some of the best IT leaders are not actually the IT leaders of the companies. They're the COOs and CFOs because they understand the broader concept and they know, like, hey, we need to bring in resources that can do this. And when you bring in somebody, and obviously this is not exclusive, like there's always plenty of exceptions, but they'll bring an IT leader that has their playbook, and that's what they know, and that's what they try to repeat again. But the industry changes a lot every year, and the tool sets and the structure is just, you got to be on top of it and always evolving with it.
And I bet some of that passion stems from watching the pain that these mistakes bring to clients of yours or people out there, and also the desire you have to just help people, like, avoid that pain. There's some easy things that you can do. So we've got a list of like 5 or 6 of these mistakes that we're going to discuss today. So let's jump into the first one. And the first one is no or inexperienced IT leadership. So you want to expand on that one a little bit for us?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit, but kind of what we've seen too is helicopter IT leadership. They come in with a playbook, it's not working, then they move on. Like, they come in the industry and they're out. Example, we had a DSO reach out to us that was trying to consolidate IT vendors to, like, I think they were like 30 something IT vendors across their platform. And they came to us and said, hey, we're looking to consolidate. We'd like to learn about your offerings. He goes, but here are the things that you have to do. And like, one of them was like, you have to use this Wi-Fi platform that just came out that I had no idea where this guy even brought this in from, like some other industry, because he didn't come from dental. And he put that in front of us, like, you'd have to support that, build that, and set these kind of arbitrary structural things in place that are like, that hasn't been deployed, that hasn't been tested, that's not even, So that's an example of like somebody that doesn't understand that playbooks from other industries don't naturally translate into it. There's a lot of horror stories there, but I think, thankfully I've seen in the last handful of years, last 3 years, 3 years, some evolution of IT leadership, because there've been some more people that have, been a part of Scale journey and learned the hard way. We were able to witness. Our best education was watching other people make mistakes early on, and that's what kind of taught us, what playbooks work and which ones don't, and the flexibility. And it's just hard when an industry has really only been around 10-ish years, with a few exceptions, to have like a pool of IT leadership. And then the other part too is they'll bring in somebody that's very, very technical in IT that is great at doing the IT things, but is not strategic. So then they're like, that's our IT person, and they're making decisions and doing everything, and it's not necessarily thought out the same way that, like a well-versed, strong CTO is. And there are some great minds in the space, and but I feel like that's a very small list of people that are really evolved, as CTOs in the space. But yeah, it's tough because there just hasn't been a lot of time. There's no curriculum. That was one thing I actually started working on. It's like, how do I create curriculum for CTOs? And I realized, when you meet somebody that's in executive leadership, and if they're new to the role, they're not really going to listen to a IT provider for strategic guidance. We had one that actually was like, listened and like absorbed it and was starting to flourish. And then the company made a change and said, okay, well, they weren't doing what we needed to. But I was like, I told you this leader was going to be the leader you needed. And then they gave us other leaders, and it was just bad. They came from outside the dental and just, micromanaging things that didn't need to be micromanaged, and not being willing to understand the deeper strategic challenges. So
there's probably some major costs that come with that one too, right? Whether it's people implementing the wrong thing that then has to be fixed later, or not implementing the right things. Like those can be very expensive mistakes.
Yeah, I wish I could get compensated for times where I said, "Hey, that's not going to work," and they're like, "Well, we're going to try it." And then they're like, "And you got to figure out how to support it." And then we get to a point, and they're like, "It's not working." And I was like, "Yeah, I told you it's not going to work. I've been doing this for a long time." But it's part of the adventure, And I've seen people that have come and learned some things the hard way and have become great, strong people in their roles. So it's an adventure.
I feel like there's some really good stories behind that advice that we probably don't have time to get into today.
Yeah, and I got some NDAs and stuff that I can't really, even not naming it, it's too obvious. So
crazy. All right, so let's move on to another one, and this one's near and dear to our hearts because we provide a service that tries to standardize some data points for DSOs. But the next one we'll talk about is just a lack of standardization. There's a lot to unpack there. So Tom, why don't you kind of walk us through why that is one of the big tech mistakes that can really hinder a DSO from accomplishing their goals?
Well, I mean, I just start with the money, economy of scale. If you are disjointed and non-standardized, supporting staff portability, all these things are, cost, or they just don't work, or they're cost prohibitive. If you're running a platform on, 4 different PMSs, and you expect staff to be able to go to one practice and be as effective on a system they don't know as well as another. But just even like from a foundational standpoint, like not having consistency and security structures across practices, anything that's standardized across a platform is going to be cheaper to maintain and support and easier to scale. And, it could be hardware, it could be, software, you name it, but just having that standardization and prioritizing it, because it's so much harder to do once you've achieved scale than it is when you are, in the earlier phases or smaller size.
What percentage of the time do you see, or do you ever see anybody that has done that when you come in to meet them for the first time, or is it pretty much everybody's had struggles there?
I would say up until this year, like majority of people came in not standardized and being there. we've had this year, we've started working with, and it carry over from the end of last year, we started working with some organizations that they get it. They're like, we standardize, but we need to kind of up level visibility, our support, security, those kind of things. And they prioritized it. And, that makes our job of coming in and showing our value on top of that much easier, but also costs them less to work with us because they've done a lot of things already and prioritized them that we don't have to do for them because they've done those. So I think people finally are figuring out that is like uber critical to everything. And a few years ago, I co-authored an article with a friend of mine, and she'd been pushing standardization for 10 years. And we both are like, he's got to do it. They got to do it. And it just always gets pegged down lower into the priority scale. And then they realize like, it's a big issue now. But I think again, like the industry being relatively immature, 10 years isn't a lot to be around. So now they're kind of learning lessons from each other and making those decisions earlier on.
I think the next point parlays great, or what we're talking about parlays in the next point very, very well, because it's a big part of standardization, and that is on-prem PMS. Clint and I talk to a lot of DSOs, and we hear a lot of different things. There's some different opinions out there, and but we would love to hear your take on why on-prem PMS is a mistake that could really hurt the scalability of a DSO.
Well, I mean, if you really look at like a lot of the on-premise software, there's always exceptions, but they were, built with the intention of being a one practice operating system. And as time went on, and there's been changes, people put money in the cloud, but the industry didn't adapt. A lot of the softwares haven't evolved a lot either. And if you really look, I always just use Microsoft as an example. You know how often you'd have to run Windows updates on your computers if you're using Microsoft, and even Apple Mac, you're running updates on a consistent basis. Those are necessary for security and stability, but they're doing that at a huge scale. So then you take a niche industry and a small user base, it's impossible for them to do all the testing necessary. And what you're just finding is they're just not very stable. I would say, with the exception of Open Dental, a lot of the on-prem stuff is job security for IT. It's the reality of the situation, and they get it. They're pushing people to move to their cloud-based products, but the bigger challenge lies in with those softwares being built the way they are. A lot of them to run stably require elevated permissions on the workstations or to the data on the server. So then you have a big security vulnerability because you got somebody working the front desk that has read and write access to the database of the PMS, which has all the EPHI on it. So it's a huge security vulnerability. But then the other part is how do you standardize security within the PMS? What people are allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, standardizing how you utilize the PMS. It's just very, very difficult to do across a platform when everybody's using a separate database in their practice, and not to mention what they have as far as disaster recovery in place, or fault tolerance, or just those things. And we did a study a few years back, and it's gotten a little bit better, but we did of non-clients of ours, and just looked at basic security thing. What did they have in place? We asked 20 questions, and it was 97% of dental practices were critically vulnerable with their data on-prem. So there's just a lot of different reasons why that impairs scalability. But how do you ensure and manage all of that at scale? It's just, with all the liabilities and stress points, it's pretty much impossible.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I was excited for this hot take from Tom, because we definitely hear different things from different people that are using cloud-based software. And some of them are claim to be multi-location cloud-based software, but it's every location actually is a different tenant. We have to completely switch context. So it's essentially behaves like they're all separate. There also is this data access issue that is harder with cloud. Cloud, providers are definitely in this camp of, we're going to lock down your data and we're going to charge you to get access to it. And it's, we get to control which third parties access it, which is why I historically have recommended, if someone has really good IT people, like if they had you as an IT person and they were like, hey, can you make my Open Dental secure? I'm guessing that if they paid the money, they could do it with you. It just costs more money. Is that a fair assumption?
I mean, Open Dental can be made incredibly secure without a significant cost. There's some things that we do as standard practices that I'm surprised others don't, just because of the way Open Dental is built. It's very easy to do these things, and it's native functionality and just configuration. So even seasoned IT companies, for whatever reason, don't do that. The ones that do tend to be the ones that do it more at scale. Do the private cloud Open Dental implementations. You touch on it. It's almost more of a political point with the data access, because you talk about the logical reasoning why they don't they want to control the read and write access. You can make that case like, okay, well, if you give this third party read and write access to your PMS and they muck up all your data, then who's that on? It's usually on the PMS to fix it. But the reality is, and I hit on this point in an article, it's like the data that's in the PMS that most people are looking at is the top of the iceberg, with just a huge amount of that's hidden. You're not seeing it in your analytics reports. They're just random data points that can be extremely valuable. And that's how you can create a secret sauce. So if you're using a cloud-based PMS that's focused on, and I don't have anything, I'd rather see, especially in the single locations, using a cloud-based PMS, with the exception of, if they're using Open Dental, we're securing it or putting a private cloud. There's just a lot of reasons to get that separate. But the data challenge is something that the API is not even letting you have access to all the things that an on-prem would let you have. So it's a very
join together, Tom. We need to join together. We need to get all the cloud-based platforms to just open up the data, like let us all work together. We'll all be friendly and good and make sure we do it the right way, right?
I don't want to say it, but there's one out there that's really talking about opening up more. And I want to see that happen, because that will, for the organizations that really want to be on a web-based platform, that would be awesome, because I would drive people to that, because for me, your data is very valuable. It's almost one of the most valuable things, in your organization, especially at scale. It's hard to fight an Open Dental in a private cloud deployment of Open Dental, because you can control the architecture, you can control the cost, you can control your data, you can do all these things. That's basically all the advantages of having it on-prem, but in a protected private cloud environment. So
if there's a cloud provider that opened up their API and made it at least significantly cheaper, I would push everyone there. Yeah. I'd be like, this is the one, go that way. So hopefully that happens.
So if any of you new cloud-based practice management software companies are out there listening, you've got some people ready to send all the offices your way.
Quit charging thousands of dollars and just we'll refer everyone to you.
The thing that's interesting too, and why I bring up Open Dental a lot, because it's the most stable on-prem, and it has a lot of advantages. But if you look at any new technology that's coming out that's interfacing with the PMS, they always start with Open Dental. So if you want to grab, some of these the cloud web-based versions of PMS have evolved and built great tool sets and things like. I'm not going to argue with that. But these people, these younger generation, I can say that now because I got all this white hair, are coming out with some technologies, and some of that I've seen, you're just like, this is like beyond what I imagined, and it's practical to deploy now. But the only one they've been able to deploy it on is Open Dental, because that's the only way they can have the data access that they need to do the tool. So it's, I have good relationships with all the PMS, and I don't feel like PMSs are one size fits all either. Some of the organizations are very well suited to one versus the other. But it's just, if you're looking at data and you want to have access to all your data and the whole iceberg, then, the options are quite a bit more limited.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, let's move on to the next one. We got two more. Tom, you're being a trooper here with us, answering all these questions. We appreciate it. It's interesting because you talk about all these things and there's all these ideas that are coming up. Like there's so much to unpack underneath all of these. So when you do your write-ups on this, which I'm sure you'll do, you'll have to let us know so we can tag them and we can spread more of this information. But this one I think takes pieces of all these things that we've been talking about, and it's just simply a lack of strategy when it comes to data or IT. That seems like a no-brainer to me if I'm trying to scale a business, whether it's a DSO or a technology company or whatever, that I got to have a good strategy. So tell me why this is one that you chose to highlight. It's got to be coming from somewhere that someone out there does not have a good strategy, and you're like, this is going to kill you. So tell me where's this one come from?
It comes from shiny things. So you'll have like a group that's scaling up in leadership, and they'll see a shiny thing. They'll be like, oh yeah, we want to get this in our practices, and they want to implement this tool set in the practices, but they don't take into consideration that they have outdated equipment at all the practices. They've been consistent. They may have even been standard on the same on-premise PMS, but different versions. Imaging is not standardized. There's just a lot of pieces. So they'll be like, okay, we want to deploy this because it's going to help us make more money. But then there's all these other foundational pieces. And I kind of consider it's like you start building in the Taj Mahal on spongy ground. If you're not focused on a strategy, you don't have the strategy, and you don't build the foundation first, it's kind of a house of cards. So we've seen just where people are focused on, like, we want to deploy the solution. We may just have taken over the IT, like, we want to deploy this. Like, okay, what about this, and this? Because if this doesn't work, none of this works. Yeah. Like, well, we want to deploy this. And we're like, okay. And then when the server fails, that is 7 years old or 8 years old, that we suggested they replace, proactively, everything, production just stops, goes to a halt at that location. So, it's really kind of setting out the goal, the overarching goal, and then reverse engineering and building your strategy instead of saying like, okay, we want to do this thing, or we want to do this thing. And I'm guilty of the shiny things too as a business leader. I see a cool new tool set. I'm like, oh yeah, I want it. But then I come back like, okay, that's not our strategy. It's nice. We can evaluate it. If we think it's beneficial, we can build it into our plan. But it's just more of like, pivoting when there's into a shiny thing instead of following, a direction.
I want to go back to what we talked about at the beginning of like being a true partner and consultant to your customers, your clients. If I'm just the cheapest solution and they say, hey, I want to do this, and you're like, oh, you're going to pay me to roll this out or whatever, sure, let's go. But the consequences are going to be there, as opposed to having a partner like what Medix does, where you have a plan. This is an ongoing relationship. Their systems. You're going to help them avoid these mistakes, right? That would cost them thousands of dollars of lost production and productivity each day by sticking to a strategy. So
we certainly try, that's the one thing you can count on from us. We're always going to be very transparent. And if you're making a decision that we know is going to probably cause pain or be risky, we tell you. I mean, it's still your business. It's up to you what you do. But for us, it doesn't do us any justice by withholding that information or being quiet and just being happy, which is like, this could impact you. And I think the one thing you touch on is such a core part of what we do is the practices, the groups that get the most value out of us truly see us as an extension of their organization. Our team is part of their team. They have a problem that comes up. They throw it at us and say, hey, what do you know about this? And we may say like, there's a couple different options and we suggest you talk to this practice, this group, whoever, and because we're never going to be we're not the operational gurus of a dental practice. We're the IT data and security aspect, but through all of what we do, we're so intertwined with all the operational things that we're very fortunate to have some amazing customers, partners, as we call them, that have been through things and have tremendous insight, and they're willing to share it with others as well. So
okay, let's get to the last one then, and then we'll recap these. But the last one that we want to talk about is just some big mistakes, tech mistakes that can kill the DSO scalability. Is no or limited buy-side IT diligence. You're gonna have to expand on that one because that's I'm not sure I quite understand what that one is.
So, as we've been a part of growth journeys with DSOs, 0 to 100 in some cases, we've been proponents of you need to do IT diligence as part of the buy process, because what happens is you inherit everything, good or bad. And what we find a lot is there'll be some beautiful practices that have lasers and 3D milling and 7 or 8 year old computers that are on their last legs. And they're not, and it's gotten a little bit better in the last year, but even the buyers, we don't care, we don't care if the equipment's old or whatever, but then they try to keep things moving, or they realize they got to spend $75,000 to replace really old computers. It's things that could have been prevented just by doing some diligence on the buy side and factor that into the purchase price, because that's depending on how you look at $70,000, $50,000, it's pretty material to a single dental practice. And we've just seen, cases where practices, they buy them and there's pushback to any sort of diligence. And, I was involved with a DSO that was doing quite a bit of buying and did some advising for them, and they deployed the buy side right away. So they knew that they were doing IT diligence as part of it, and they weren't just having them check boxes. They're actually looking at it and looking at Windows 11, what's going to support Windows 11 and the compliance. And they had their eyes on the prize, and they were doing it the right way. But we've seen the vast majority of the industry not do that. So it puts them in a predicament once they get the practice bought, because not only do they have to roll it all in, but also they realize that they have, a skeleton in the closet with old equipment. And it's not obvious, they see it's a nice computer. It's got nice 3 patient monitors, but it's that core, the infrastructure that's there too, can be really dated and prone to failure or even failing. We've had cases where somebody bought a practice and they're hey, go onboard it. We go onboard it, and the server is actually in failure, to the point where we're struggling just to get the data off of it to put it onto something else temporarily. So
that sounds like a nightmare.
This is how Tom's life, Clint.
I remember at Weave, because we backed up small portions of the data, right, like appointments and patients, and every once in a while, some poor office would call in and be like, our server crashed. Can you just send us what you have? I'm like, oh man, we're not built to be a backup solution. This is just for operational stuff. But we'll send you what we have. It's just crazy. But you always just felt so bad for them.
Yeah. It's probably one of the most painful experiences they can go through professionally.
Well, and DSOs generally are, they're ambitious, right? They're trying to grow. That's why they're in group dentistry. And I hope that what Tom is sharing sparks at least some thoughts in everybody's minds of how serious these mistakes can be, and being proactive with them, although may incur some costs now. The headaches and costs that it will prevent are massive, not just in the productivity that you will maintain, but in the cost that it would be to unwind and redo and fix these things. These things are really serious, and so Tom is speaking from a position of experience here, being the one to implement the proactive things to prevent the preventative components, but also having been in the situation of cleaning up from the DSOs that didn't put these things in place. So I hope that people listen, that they take these steps and try to not be another casualty to the lack of investment into these types of things.
And I guess you got to speak on this. So we're talking about disruption, my industry generally sucks. Like IT providers generally do. I'm thankful, in the dental IT space, there's a couple peers out there that I respect, that do a lot of things the right way. But the vast majority don't. And the buyers don't necessarily know the differences. And I think that's also the caution point, is that, we're never going to come to a practice group DSO and say, you need this, if it's not something they need or not something they're going to get benefit from. But they have baggage from previous IT providers that wanted to always selling them something, and unfortunately IT it's the barrier of entry is relatively low. And so there's some companies that operate a little more, no differently than like a used car lot. They just want to throw product and throw service. And I can tell you a lot of horror stories of things we've uncovered. We took over a dental practice because their IT person died. And they'd been with this IT person for 18 years or something like that. And we uncovered that they were getting fleeced, like really badly fleeced, like paying $6,000 for a computer that's a refurb that probably cost about $400, and they just trusted that person implicitly. But that's the thing we have to combat against when somebody's had like a bad taste in their mouth. It's frustrating for us because, we're going to do things the right way. We're going to be upfront. We're going to be transparent. We're going to tell you things that you may not want to hear, but they're the truth. But we always get kind of boxed together with the other ones. So it's create some fun challenges. IT is not a sexy topic. Nobody likes to talk about it. It's not like the first thing they have a cocktail, like, let's talk IT. It's about all the other fun stuff, but we're important for the fun stuff. We're the foundation of the fun stuff.
So Tom, if we have listeners that want to talk to you about these mistakes, or they want to use your services or anything, how would someone get in touch with you? What would be the best way?
Well, you can check out our website at medicsdental.com, or you can email me at tom@medicsdental.com.
Well, then to finish, Clint, I'm going to defer to you here because you have scaled a technology system from 0 users to 25,000 plus users. How, to kind of bring this home, if people are not listening to what Tom is saying, right? How are they ever going to disrupt anything and make the impact that they want to make? Is it even possible?
Yeah, I love his analogy of the Taj Mahal on spongy ground. That's really what it comes down to, is if you're going to do something special, if you're going to grow and you have big ambitions to disrupt this industry, don't let some of these fundamental pieces, this bedrock of technology, just fall as it may. Like, be deliberate, have a strategy. I love all of this stuff that Tom has talked to us about. I think it's brilliant. Except for definitely go with on-premise systems still.
Well, we can debate that one out separately.
I'll close that, dude. Awesome, Tom. Well, thank you so much for being with us. I'm sure we'll probably have you on again. We'll do a great debate on the on-prem. Because there's good points on all sides, right? We all agree. We just need the data accessible, and cloud would win. But super fun to have you, Tom. You're such a good friend, so willing to help us all the time. I'll just give my testimonial. I worked with hundreds of IT professionals when I was at Weave. People like Tom are hard to come by, and they really do a great job. And if you haven't talked to medics, you definitely should. So thanks, Tom, for being with us, and we look forward to talking to you again sometime in the future.
Oh, thank you.